Item 6B is Planning Commission discussion.
Through the Chair.
Commissioner Mishra.
Mr. Samud kind of beat me to it, but over the past 10 years, I've seen that number, the parking count, increase in percentage. And what is the critical mass at which we, or the City Council needs to activate some other plan for parking? I mean, do we have a number in mind? I know that that percentage keeps ticking up as more and more businesses move into the area and they're successful over time. And I know it probably started off at like 54%, and the past 10 years it's taken up pretty fast. So I think it's at what, 68% or 70%?
Yeah, at this point, I think that as the associate planner did his survey, as Matt did his survey, I think he came up with about 68% average.
And on the weekends, there are certain days I can't find any parking. Saturday at 10 o'clock, there's no way I'm going to find any parking. So I know that you guys excluded that. But what is that critical threshold, and are we going to keep measuring through these venues when people open up their shops?
Well, let's talk about that. I think that first off, as you know, we have competing interests. So we have a number of vacancies in the downtown currently, and as we have prospective businesses come in that represent permitted uses permitted as of right, and we have vacancies, I think we as staff try to do the best we can to acquaint them with our requirements, work with them to try to bring them into town so that hopefully they are successful. As far as a threshold or, at what point do we say no, I think that as a city we're moving forward.
May I interject?
Sure.
I'm not saying we say no, but what I'm looking for is, are there plans for expansion of the garage from 1 level to 2 levels?
I think I'm going there.
Yeah, sorry.
So that's okay. So, as we move forward now, last year you recommended adoption of the Transit Corridor Specific Plan. The City Council adopted the Transit Corridor Specific Plan. So that is a fundamental guide for this community in terms of the commercial corridors and the downtown. And within that plan, it talks about preparing a parking management plan, and specifically for that area, as you recall, I'm sure, in the implementation section. And it talks about funding resources, funding sources, such as creating a development impact fee, other possibilities, other measures or mechanisms to finance perhaps a central parking garage or parking structure within the downtown. We're at a point now that we are moving forward with the implementation of the Transit Corridor Specific Plan. And for example, an initial step is that we had a meeting with the City Council recently on May 29th to talk about bringing forward a ballot measure to the voters here in San Bruno this November to talk about how do we fully implement the Transit Corridors Plan, how do we incentivize new development and redevelopment in this important area of town. And one of the amendments that the voters would be looking at would be an amendment to allow for multi-level above-ground parking garages. So kind of an initial step really is to be allowed to have those multi-level above-ground parking garages in our downtown. Right now we have, as you know, the surface level parking. So a question, Commissioner, that you just asked was, when do we go forward with, multi-level parking garages? Well, an initial step is really to be enabled, to be allowed to do that. And so it will be important as we go forward with this ballot measure to see that hopefully approved so that could occur as an example. But that's, up to the voters here in this community to decide. In addition to that, the staff this coming fiscal year, we've been talking about it in budget sessions, we'll be moving forward with it. The intent really is to have a staff-level interdepartmental committee made up of staff from community development, from public services, community services, city manager's office, et cetera, to really look at that section of the Transit Corridor Specific Plan, the implementation section. So step one is is to bring forward this ballot measure for consideration. We'll see what happens. Hopefully we do that this November. Another step is really to look at that whole bundle of measures. And key measures there are funding. How do we go forward? Let's say that bundle of amendments would be approved by the voters. Then the next step really is, how do you fund these things? How do we fund infrastructure improvements in the specific plan area? Full street reconstruction. I mean, as we look at San Mateo Avenue, for example, we fully imagine that water, sewer, the whole street section would be reconstructed. How do we fund that? In addition, the parking garage or garages would need to be funded. So the intent really is with the staff level committee is to look at the full package and kind of look at what are the priorities in terms of moving forward, in terms of funding, projects, phasing, sequencing, and kind of looking at the bigger picture. And Mr. Samet, Dennis Samet was correct in terms of the bigger picture. We do need to look at that bigger picture. I think we're in a transition period, and so, working with individual businesses to enable them to come in and hopefully provide a needed service or product in this community and hopefully be successful is our intent and objective. But he's right in terms of the bigger long-term picture. And I think the Transit Corridors Plan really lays out what we need to do, and it's now stepping forward. The ballot measure, kind of the overall strategy for implementation, and we're very hopeful that this coming fiscal year, a few of those major steps, are put in place, and that we can then move forward with some of those improvements. So it is a bigger picture. He had many good points, and I think that the staff and council and yourselves will be working on those over the next year and well beyond.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other planning commission discussion?
Yes,
Commissioner
through the
Saluda.
chair. Since Dennis brought up the new Caltrans station, what is happening to the old one? What is that going to morph into?
Flora, do you have any information on that? At this point, I can't really respond specifically to that. So let me do some research and I'll get back to you on that, exactly what that might be.
Okay.
I know there's been some general discussion about different options, but I'm not clear in terms of exactly what the future use might be. But let me research that and I'll get back to you.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Through the chair,
Commissioner Johnson.
just a bit of feedback on Dennis's input. I do agree that people want to park as close as possible to where you're dining, and it's common. And if you look at Burlingame Avenue and University Avenue, San Carlos Avenue, you go round and round and round because people want to be close. Some of those areas have actual lots, and if you go into the lots, most often you can find a spot. And so my concern is that we would have a structure, probably a large structure. I don't think it'll be empty, but I don't know that it'll be utilized in the same way. So as we move forward, and as a project in itself, to think about those areas, because people want to continue to park as close as possible. And there are little pockets of parking. If you go around Burlingame Avenue, you drive around until you find that spot, and the same with University Avenue. And I must go around and around in San Carlos until we can find that spot. And so it really, it's tricky, and sometimes it's trendy on top of that. I think that until we become that kind of a environment avenue, people will want to be closer because there's sometimes some safety issues and other things to take a look at, and lighting, and there are combinations of things. And I see some good improvement. I'm pleased with some of the changes. I see the lighting around the trees. There's a lot of thought going into it, and I think we're moving forward. And there was a time when Bob George, an architect and a previous planning commissioner, that actually worked on a charrette and made some proposals. So there's been a lot of thought. I've been on the commission for 24 years, and there's been a lot of thought and a lot of discussion. And the reality is, there are pockets of places open, but when it's impacting our own place, such as Dennis's or my own school, and I impact my neighbors with my own business, it's right in, it's in your backyard kind of thing. So as a study session or a planning project moves forward, there's a lot to talk about. It's really not just a structure. Because you would want a structure in every corner so people can get to those places. So I think there's a lot to think about. A lot of, we've done some good community work in past times where there's input from the community. It's been extremely successful. People have been, their best thinking comes out, ideas come out. Additionally, people who have a buy-in and great ideas, retired people and professional people. So I think there's a lot to grow and to think about. And I know myself and I know my colleagues, commissioners, this has come out over the many, many years. And we continue, as Jenna said, to continue to do it. There isn't, well, I don't know this for a fact because I'm certainly not on staff, nor am I in the police department in those areas. But there continues to, it's not so oversaturated that people are, are going away. But in the moment, it's frustrating. So I do know that we'll move forward, and I know and I trust that it'll be done well. But there's a lot to think about. It's not just as simple as a structure. And with the Caltrains there, what used to be a pocket of town that was not as enchanting now is pretty prime real estate right in that little corner. And I think about, that is a very lucrative, fun place to think about what could possibly go there. And so we have to also get the buy-in of the building owners. I think that's a huge factor. I think business owners want to do wows in their environments. They want to put the awnings and do all the things. But there's also major improvement, and which stifles business. And it's difficult for businesses to absorb all the cost of a property that doesn't belong to them. So I do think there's a lot to think about, and I look forward to that opportunity of moving forward in that discussion. So thank you for...
I agree with you. It is not just about a structure or structures. It is more about a parking management plan, and there are many different aspects to a parking management plan. And we will have study sessions and really think about the various aspects that could make up our plan for that area.
Any other commission discussion?
Through the chair.
Commissioner Biassatti.
It was mentioned in the conversation this evening around parking that we've added a lot of businesses to downtown, and his concern was that we're not looking at the impact overall. So I'd like to point out that I'm grateful that this study was done recently and currently with this project, so it includes the impacts of anything that we've approved up to now. So thank you for the efforts on that. It's appreciated.
Any additional discussion?